Well, welcome everybody to the final session of the EU Defense Forum. My name is Amanda Sloat. I am the Robert Bosch Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution here in Washington, and I'm delighted to be joined by the Defense Minister of the Netherlands, Ank Bijleveld. And I have to say, Minister, as a Dutch American, I am particularly excited about the opportunity to speak with you today. The minister has been in this position since October 2017 and previously served as an MP, mayor, state secretary for home affairs, and a provincial leader. Minister, I wanted to start out with a topic that's on the minds of everybody, which is the coronavirus. Yeah. The Netherlands seems to have both flattened the curve and also found a way to keep life tolerable by taking an approach that I know your Prime Minister has called an intelligent lockdown. Yeah. I also understand that the Defense Ministry has been quite actively involved in the coronavirus pandemic effort, including things from border enforcement to logistical management. So would be interested to hear some of your experiences in the Netherlands of responding to the coronavirus, lessons learned, and particularly what you were able to do in the Defense Ministry.
Yeah. I'm also delighted to speak with you today, and I'm quite interested in your Dutch background, but we can't talk about it now. I think we can do it later on, perhaps. I think you are right that when you look at COVID-19 or the corona pandemic, we chose for an intelligent lockdown, as our Prime Minister said, and that went very well. In the way that for us the IC capacity, how many beds we should have for Corona was our point to look at all the time, and we worked together with all the departments, but also with the Department of Defense, in a way that we said. Our doctors, our nurses are in the normal hospitals, are working over there, and that went quite well. Our planning capacity, in the way that our medical planners worked in missions, for example, in Afghanistan, they know how to plan, how to look at a situation. That's difficult, and they helped the civil hospitals with their planning capacity to spread the patients over the country, and that worked quite well because in the Netherlands the hospitals are all separate. They don't have we don't know the total amount of IC beds in the Netherlands, and our planners actually they did something that they do in missions also. They looked around and they made the things that they do in missions. Also, in a way, they had a situational awareness of what's necessary, how many beds, how the logistic should go, where should they go to, also to other countries, and they actually arranged that, and that worked quite well. And I think the most important thing that we did was work together, coordinate with all the civil partners together to have this intelligent lockdown and to stay under the amount of IC beds that we have in the Netherlands.
Well, I congratulate your government on a successful handling, certainly more, I think, successful than some of what we have been seeing in the United States, where we are apparently still in the midst of phase one of pandemic. You mentioned in your response the fact that there was a lot of coordination within your national government. And I think it's also been interesting from Washington to watch what's been happening at the European level in terms of response to the pandemic. Initially, it seemed like a lot of the responses were very much driven at national level in terms of closing the borders, some reluctance to share some equipment, but then there slowly was more coordination across the union, especially on the financial side. So I'm interested what your takeaways have been from how the coronavirus has affected thinking within the European Union, and again, to relate it to defense issues, if there's lessons from this for cooperation on defense issues, logistics, broader partnership across the Union.
Yes, of course, there are a lot of lessons that we should learn. I think. I think in the EU, the cooperation went not fast enough in the beginning. Also, the cooperation for example, in helping countries that needed extra beds. I have to compliment the German government. They stepped in, I think, as the first partner over there. They opened their hospitals also for Italian, for French, for also Dutch patients. But we should have done that quicker. I think that's one of the lessons we should learn. We should make also more materials ourselves. That's one of the lessons that we learned. We should spread it more, and there we should cooperate and defend in all the countries. The Italian, the French. I talked to my German and French colleague about it, but also in Italy and Spain, who were heavily still have a lot of pain when you look at what happens over there. Then the army or the defense organization in all the countries were crucial to help the civil organization and the health organization. And there we learned that we should work more together in a way that, for example, helicopters we could share more. Our helicopters helped also for transporting patients to Germany, share equipment. That's one of the things we can learn from, and there we should also cooperate more with NATO. I think NATO EU cooperation would also expand on this side in sharing, in logistics, etc. And that's one of the things we also talked about. That, for example, I talked with my French colleague about it. We are all operating in the Sahel region. In Africa, it's still going on further. And when in the Netherlands, the amount is going down, and perhaps we can share equipment also through our defense organization in, for example, Africa or Afghanistan.
Sure. Well, I'm glad you raised the question of NATO EU cooperation, because that's also something there's been a lot of interest in here in Washington, especially amid the current drift in the transatlantic relationship, and a lot of talk that we've been hearing coming out of Brussels about strategic autonomy. Curious how you see NATO EU cooperation. We talked about it a little bit in the context of the pandemic, but also more broadly, and specifically whether there's things that the EU can be doing that are complementary to what NATO is doing. And of course, we also now have this question post-Brexit with the UK. That's in NATO, but unfortunately no longer in the European Union. And so how you see these two important institutions able to work together?
Yeah, for us, the NATO is still the cornerstone of the defense cooperation, and so for the Netherlands, that's very important when I look at that side. But we can actually work more together because there are a lot of threats. And when you look at the COVID-19, for example, it demonstrated that we need a 360-degree approach, and there comes the EU in, and they can do. They are more on the the civilians, working on the civilian side, and we should work together on that. For example, when you look at the EU, we are the lead nation of the military mobility project. You know, it's very important for NATO too. And when we want to share equipment, it's very important that we can transport our equipment through Europe. And there is actually something to do for the EU. Also, when you look at, for example, for NATO, very important, the third country side, because the two biggest countries of NATO are UK and US, and they are outside of the EU, but they should transport our equipment also fast in Europe. And so there are a lot of things there where we should work together. For us, the cornerstone is NATO. When you look at defense cooperation, so the transatlantic side is very important. Actually, when you look at the security context in Europe, but we can actually do more together.
So one of the big debates in recent years, of course, on NATO has been the question of burden sharing, and President Trump, of course, has been very focused on this 2% metric that was agreed in Wales a number of years ago. I know Dutch military spending has increased about 25% since 2014, but only 1.2% of GDP last year. And I know that you were speaking to your parliament about this a couple of weeks ago and acknowledged that your spending was unlikely to reach the target by 2024.
Yeah.
So I'm interested, how you're seeing defense spending in the context of coronavirus. Obviously, you're having to spend a lot of money on domestic things rather than security in response. And how you're seeing this debate more broadly. Your prime minister, of course, has acknowledged that Europe needs to do more, that burden sharing is important. And so how your government is looking at this question of contributions of burden sharing.
Yeah. I actually agree with President Trump on this point, that we should spend more, because when we have an agreement, we should actually spend 2%. And we increased our spendings, as you said, but it's not enough. But it's not only cash; it's also capabilities and commitments, I think, when I look at the NATO side. But when you look at COVID-19, then I think the increase of in defense spending is even more urgent, because the pandemic is a catalyst for the security threats that we actually see. It once again shows the necessity of strong armed forces, because you can't predict what will happen. And of course, you're right that perhaps the COVID-19 will have an impact on national budgets all over the world. But for me, it's very important. I think it's very important that we don't get a decrease again in the defense spendings. Actually, that we should increase, because we have worked hard to reach more investments in defense in the last years, and I believe that the unpredictable threats that we see, not only COVID, we didn't see it, none of us, we didn't see it coming, but we saw everywhere how important our military personnel is to assist in this kind of crisis. So actually, I think it's very important that we even increase more, because we have a lot of unpredictable threats, and COVID is one of them.
And do you think that your government is going to be able to increase spending more, notwithstanding the coronavirus pandemic? And what are specific areas that you would like to focus on?
Actually, I can't say yes or no on this question. I actually talked with my colleague of finance about it, that it's very important to spend more. And we are also this year increasing our budget. But yeah, you have a lot of things in which we should invest. Then I think we should learn lessons from the coronavirus. and we should look in, and we should learn them fast. And for example, in logistics, combat support, the combat support side is very important when you look at this kind of crisis. So the support side, and I think we should spend more on that side.
So I know that we are nearing, unfortunately, already the end of our short time together. But I have to say, in addition to being a Dutch American, my great grandma was from Zeeland.
Okay.
I am a yoga practitioner and was very excited to see the online statement that you made recognizing International Yoga Day. And was particularly struck by your comments that the Dutch Armed Forces have been doing yoga for the last 15 years. And that you have over 130 instructors within the Army. And so as we are wrapping up this forum and all of us are going to be returning to our stressful coronavirus lives, would be interested on what the experience has been of the ministry with yoga and whether there's lessons that can take away from that.
Yeah, it's very important that our military personnel also finds some rest in a day, and yoga is very important to get fit, also in a physical but also in a psychological way, and it works really well in the Netherlands. So when you don't have it, you should try it.
Well, I think that is excellent advice on which to end this session. Minister, thank you very much for joining us today in the forum. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and good luck in dealing with the pandemic and these other challenges going forward.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Amanda. What a terrific question to finish on. That is our last interview of the day and session of the day, and concludes really the last 2 days of programming. We had over 40 speakers and 15 segments. This is an experiment, of course, to do it all online, all virtually, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but I thought it worked extraordinarily well. So just thank you so much to all of the team involved in it, the technical team here, and of course, managing those who managed all of the virtual appearances, to everyone at the EU delegation and my colleagues at Brookings, to all of the speakers and all of the moderators as well. I thought it was a really fascinating conversation, and we hope to continue it online in the coming days and to meet in person next year, hopefully. But Dervla, I'd like to thank you and to thank all of your colleagues for your partnership over the last few months. And I'd like to turn it over to you for the final few words.
Thanks, Tom. Well, I hope that everyone else found the discussions as interesting and stimulating as we did. We did have an internal debate as to whether we should hold the forum this year, given that we couldn't do it in person. But I hope you'll all agree that the quality of the participants and the interventions has vindicated the decision to go ahead. I would echo Tom's thanks to all of our wonderful panelists and moderators. Very special thanks, obviously, to Brookings Institution, in particular, General Allen, Tom Wright, and Felipe Letsas, but everybody who participated in making this such a success. Also echo the thanks to the team at the EU delegation, in particular, my colleague Eili Ribelis, who's our Security and Defence Councillor, our military attaché, Fritz Urbach, and our wonderful press and public diplomacy team, led by Maria Belovas and Martin Caudron, as well as the contractors and the tech team who made sure that everything ran smoothly today. So just to recall that all of the discussions will be available online on the EU in the US YouTube. You can continue the conversation using the hashtag EU Defence, that's defence with an S. And I certainly hope that we will be back next year for an in-person physical forum here in Washington. But I think I can guarantee that either way, we will be having the 10th edition next year. So thanks to all of you for tuning in.